I'm going to take it over because we're going to be ending this session in a couple of minutes at 3:15. I might sneak past that 1 minute, but because we're in the midst of a Black Lives Movement and Black Lives Matter indeed, here's the question I want to put out. It's not even a question. Here's what I want to say. In all of these, just as we find with COVID and everything else, it's been those communities that are not being served well. And when we think about the work that we do, it's been in those communities. And one of the things I know, if we want to get more of them, we wanted more young people, we wanted more people of color. Young people are easier, but getting more people of color, we must admit, is challenging. But if you want to catch trout, you have to go where the trout are. In all of our organizations, we have to be prepared to go to those communities. When we talk about media, we got Black media, we got talk radio programs. I got one. We need to begin to organize our connections with them and get in on those talk programs to filter the air. I will end by saying this because it's one of the best things that helped me learn. Think about the songs you know that you didn't pick, but now you know the words, you're humming them because you kept hearing it everywhere. That's how our messages need to be and pointing in the direction we need to go. We need to be the light. Thank you all. Thank you, Mappa. When I talk about work in the media and Black communities, a lot of the radio programs in the community, not only Black communities, because the programs do play beyond their own borders. And one of the things about getting there, many of the programs have a call-in possibility to where when you're on air and you're talking, you can take questions over the air. And the reason is because in those communities, the absence and the presence of this conversation makes them think this is over their head and that they don't have skin in the game and they have nothing to do with the issue. And there's also a downside because, in movements, there are some who could, there are peace movements and there are people who look like a peace movement, but what they espouse is more divisive and going in the wrong direction. They don't even get in with the major foe. And I say that because now that we have a Secretary of Defense of color in General Lloyd Austin, one of the things we're going to have to deal with is that same kind of inflection we had when Obama came in and everybody lost how they could talk, afraid that it might rock the boat. Well, we need to rock the boat. More than rocking the boat, we need to change the crew in the boat because nothing wrong with the boat is the problem with the crew rowing the wrong way. So we need to learn how to help communities to understand what we understand and engage in this work. We have to admit that the racism that has been in the culture has some effect. Some of us are fearful about going into certain communities, and that's not just a white thing, that is also a Black thing, as well as an immigrant thing. And so we have to be recognizing of that. And again, the information, we have to make the information more palatable to them and more able for them to incorporate in what they're about. I often tell people for housing, for instance, we talk about the housing issues and we talk about gentrification. Well, you want to know another view of gentrification? A militarized gentrification that is putting bases in countries that don't want it, that are displacing people off their property and that are affecting the entire situation for those. When we talk about climate, even if we get all the policies and laws that look good, that protect us, unless we deal with the massive militarization by the US of the planet and all the green gas emissions is doing, then we're not being true to what we need to do. That is why we are engaged in a worldwide struggle. And when I say we, I'm not talking about those leaders who argue and talk about each other and blame each other. I'm talking about the people just like us in countries who are organizing and struggling, dealing with wayward politicians and greedy corporate thugs. And the question to us is the same question that was in the movies The Untouchable. No matter what we see, The question we have to answer is, what are we prepared to do? Now that gets hard because some of us are kind of practicing what I call excusiology. We kind of want to just watch it. This is not about entertainment. This is about entertainment. And part of doing this is it's feeling the spirit. I remember when I first started engaging in the anti-apartheid movement, one of the things that used to strike me about that movement and the energy is that even after the many deaths in South Africa in the midst of the struggle, at the funeral, there'd be in this motion, this energy. There'd be mourning, but not mourning. And they had this energy that was driving them on towards climbing that hill. And they understood that some of us won't get all the way up. Ain't that right, Dr. King? But we're going to get there. And that's the challenge we have, that we have to feel the spirit of all those movements who, in the face of all that overwhelming power against them, but who, with an understanding of truth and a mirror reflection of self, understood they were the light. Yeah, that's what we have to do.
Jim, we have comments in the chat by Savina Martin and by Michelle Barnes in response to your points. So,
I'm sorry.
See if one of them want to come up and speak and voice their point.
Oh, thanks, Carl. Appreciate it. I was writing in the chat, and nice to meet you, Jim. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts.
All right.
A few years ago, when I attended my first MAPA conference, the same type of question came up from someone who mentioned, we don't have Black people here, right? And I think my response was, the most important thing right now that we can do, right, is forge relationships, build relationships. We can't cherry pick. We're not a monolith, right? We are not the special people that we have to be treated in such a way that we have to come up with some grand plan in order to find us. No, my response also was, you guys have been around over 40 years. Have you invited us to the table, right? Have you invited us to the table? Yeah. And I think we do make enough noise where we bring our own chairs and sit it at the table, some tables.
Yeah, sure.
But, first things first, one step at a time. Let's begin to forge relationships with our Black and brown brothers and sisters.
Yes, indeed.
It's not that difficult.
Yes, indeed.
We do that in the Poor People's Campaign, a national revival. We pride ourselves on listening to stories and building relationships honestly and openly. And
yes,
sometimes
indeed.
it's hard and difficult, but we live in a very hard, and I feel my minister's hat coming on, hard and difficult. We have to be honest to a fault, and sometimes it will be painful, but it's okay, and we will get by. We are all about dismantling this system that has kept people oppressed. And I'm going to keep going on, but that's
you got to go on. And then what did the old folks say? Well, I don't mean old folks, but in that term, it said, I ain't no ways tired. But something you said that I just want to bring in, and Michelle, I'm talking too much, so you come on. I want to say something that we have to remember in this stretch of history. When Dr. King spoke at Riverside, he was leading the Poor People's Campaign then. And one of the things that he understood is that the monies and the needs of the Poor People Campaign was being wasted on fighting a war in Vietnam and investing in all that is buying and creating more war toys. And when you add like to think of the corporate thugs in there, he knew the money was going down. What did they tell him? Black movements tell him. They told him civil rights and peace don't go together. He had some pushback. From that time, right on up to relatively not a long 5 to 10 years of our time now, We've been struggling to connect that dot back. The siloism that exists in the moment, social justice groups, they went over here. Peace groups were over here. Right now in the peace movement, we talk about moving the money, MTM. In the social justice movement, they run with Les Leopold's piece, Runaway Inequality. We have to make them and help them understand that, yeah, you can't talk about runaway inequality and not talk about the monies that were in human needs area that was taken and not in the monies that should have went in that didn't get in there and were circumvented and went to the Pentagon budget. We have to get everybody to understand that, and social justice groups got to get in and get more involved. I'm not putting them down because I lead a social justice group as well as a peace group, but I believe that's our work. I'm shutting up, Michelle.
It's okay. I'm like everything that you guys have said is super important. I really appreciate listening to it. And I guess like specifically when you were talking about how to engage the Black community and other minority communities in these like large overhead seeming struggles, is that like, so I'm lucky that I grew up, the suburb I live in is 95% white. So I was given a lot of opportunities that a lot of people who look like me have not. And in my interactions with people from those backgrounds, I've come to feel that so much of the problem with these addressing these high level issues is that not only do the problems and issues feel so intractable and intertwined, but also they feel really esoteric to the struggles of daily life. Like, even though, like, again, I live in a very privileged position relative to a lot of people, and I don't take that for granted at all. But, you know, I'm 25, I'm recently graduated. There's a lot of stuff that I have to do just to keep the ship of my life on track. And as much as I want to be involved and engaged and invested in all these big problems, it's really hard to reach for the top when your foundation isn't quite stable. And I think that a big issue is people feel like these issues don't apply to them because in the day-to-day struggle of like choosing between rent and dinner, nuclear proliferation doesn't seem to come into that. And with regards to the issue of like the pushback between peace and civil rights, unfortunately, the military is basically like a socialist jobs program where you go in and you're guaranteed pay and services and like you do work, but things are taken care of for you, and it's a lot more stable than you might find in the private sector. And so I think it's also interesting there where like so much of the military is people of color who just felt like there was no other way out, and it was the most stable thing to do. So yeah, I just wonder what your thoughts on those.
Well, I can tell you as a combat veteran of Vietnam myself, having served as a machine gunner, I enlisted in the Marine Corps 2 weeks after Dr. King was killed. Because I was walking around at that time wondering, what do I have to do to show I care about this country as much as anybody else? And it's a mindset that every Black in their individual way and everybody of color goes through, wondering when they see all these terrible things and wonder, what do they have to do? Well, at the time, because the culture in '68 still had a lot of militarization in it. The culture was still racist. In my community, you know what the elders were saying? If you weren't already going to college and if you didn't have a good job lined up, in their perception, they would say, going in the military, that makes something of yourself. If you look in a lot of homes of people of color, and look back in their history, you see a picture of someone in the military with that cap flipped down on their ear, and people endure it. But they endure it in blindness, the same way that many say, thank you for their service. I say to people, maybe you don't want to thank me for my service. Because if you knew what I had to do over there, you would either be mad at me or the ones who sent me. So who has the problem? It's the one who has allowed themselves to be duped into the falsity, the same way we use, hey, good morning, how you feeling? I'm going down the block before you can get it out of your mouth. Do I really care? These terms, we have a lot of slogans, but when we say the slogans, what's behind it? People say Black Lives Matter. I hear you saying that. What's the action? That's what we have to look at. Not to beat them down, but to show them how to raise it up. Because here's another thing. Those who have a little age, their manner of excusation of practicing that is to say, well, you know, I'm old now, and they act like I'm retired, like I don't do, I know you can't do much, but you can do something. And the best thing is to do is really make the seat at the table for the young people be a real seat that they can be and participate fully. I'm gonna say it. I know you know it, and I'm gonna say it. That even as we call young people to the table now, we haven't really structured ourselves to receive the energy and the kind of mindset you're bringing. Why? Because we are folks who come out of an old system that we have practiced. We can almost do it blindfolded. And here you come with this radical, new, creative, innovative site that changes word and action and how you do it. And we're trying, whoa, slow down. And then your trap is this. You're not, even as you get to your 20, you ain't that long away from the apron string, the supportive family thing. And so you got to break that had you when mama, grandma, uncle, and call, you had to respond to that even before you could respond to what you might want to do. And I'm saying all of that's in play. It's not too heavy. Some of this we could play out in our organizing meetings, our meetings when our groups are meeting. How many people do role playing to show how I'm going into a Black neighborhood? How many how many people of color do any role playing with in these groups so that others can understand this is what I feel like when I go into certain white communities. I mean, until we get real in the relationships with each other, sharing not only our superness about how great we think we are, but our honesty about that fear we have. As a veteran, we love to tell war stories.
Jim.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I know you have many more stories, but